When I was a kid, I would watch the early beta trailers of Dead Rising over and over, and I would browse IGN and GameSpot to see all the interesting images uploaded there, and I wouldn't really notice how different it was from the version of the game I'd been playing. This is because back then I wasn't really that meticulous when it came to this sort of thing. It was only when I got my first modified Xbox 360 that I learned you could download and play unfinished beta versions of games found online in different forums. And they would show visible changes from the versions I've come to know, such as the final game. This, of course, piqued my interest as to what Dead Rising's beta might have looked like, because by now I had been messing around with the Halo 3 beta and getting used to what these types of things are, and I was slowly getting interested in the whole pre-release community. After realizing there might be a chance to find Dead Rising beta builds, I checked if you could just simply download one that had been leaked online, much like all the other builds I had downloaded. However, I quickly realized that Dead Rising betas were much more obscure. They were actually so obscure that only one person was able to confirm that they owned any build of any kind, and at the time, this was Assembler. After a while of painstakingly trying to get in contact with Assembler to buy the builds off of him, I realized he wasn't interested in selling them. So this left me with no other choice than to recreate or restore beta assets into the final game. Since I couldn't actually play any real builds of the game, I decided to just recreate them, which to me was the next best thing. I continued this for almost 3 years, getting better and better at Dead Rising beta knowledge, and also attracting the attention of a lot of people. But I was always jealous that, despite knowing I was probably the biggest fan of this game, I might never have the chance to own a beta build of it. It was hard to come to grips with this, because having to painfully recreate beta assets of the game from morning till dawn, and knowing that the beta assets I was trying to recreate were already in the hands of someone out there, was really discouraging to me. But eventually, over time, I realized that just because I was a fan of the game, it didn't entitle me to owning any builds. So eventually I stopped worrying about getting these beta builds. I continued modding Dead Rising and documenting its beta history on the forum, and I just got over it. It was pointless to want something that was basically impossible to own. So although I kept dreaming about it, I didn't let it bother me, and I just moved on. However, one day, without even trying, my luck had changed completely. To this day, we now own 4 different builds of Dead Rising, covering 4 huge parts of its history. Over the past year, lots of people have been wondering how the hell I got these builds in the first place, and it's a story that I never really shared publicly, but I think it's finally time. In early 2016, my friend Chris messaged me on Skype directing my attention to an eBay listing of a Dead Rising preview disc for sale. I can't really explain to you the level of excitement I had because I basically went into a coma. The eBay auction lasted about 6 days, and for those 6 days I practically did nothing, aside from sitting at my computer and hoping I could outbid someone at the last second, because this was presumably my only chance to get this disc, because if someone else bought it, I would be back at square one. Thankfully, with help from my friend Richard, we were able to snipe the eBay auction at the last second, and the rest was history. Now this build is not that different from the final game, but the fact that waiting 4 years for something like this to happen actually happened was amazing. But that was only one build of Dead Rising that I managed to get. Fast forward about half a year later, and I came across 3 more. One random day, I was checking Assembler Games, and I was also updating my preview beta post that I made, and I had just gone back to the main page of the site. I came across a thread in the recent post section titled Dead Rising Early Builds. Now, I kinda chuckled to myself because I figured the post was probably just about some person asking where they can get Dead Rising builds, so I almost didn't click on it, but something told me to. This thread was not asking where they could find Dead Rising builds, it was a thread about selling them. These were the pictures that were uploaded to this post, asking what this guy could possibly sell them for. Now, once I calmed down a bit, I started to get increasingly worried that some person had already messaged the guy and bought them. So I acted fast. I left a post on the thread, telling the guy that I was going to private message him, and praying that I was the first one to do so. When I got in contact with him, I learned that he wasn't really eager to sell the discs, but rather just interested in price checking them. This was a bummer, but I told the guy that if he was ever interested in selling, that I was ready to buy. In the actual thread itself, many people pitched in to let the seller know how dedicated I was to this game. This was a really nice thing to see. I owe a huge thanks to everyone there that let the seller know. After a couple more private messages with the guy, he eventually wanted to sell me the ISOs of the disc, which I of course wanted the discs as well, but I was fine with whatever as long as I can get my hands on these builds. My friend Frico was nice enough to pitch in a big chunk of cash to help me buy these builds, and a few days later they were downloaded and on my dev kit. I probably didn't get more than 3 hours of sleep in 5 days. I was just playing these builds over and over, and also recording lots of footage for you guys to enjoy. Now, about 2 months later, the seller warmed up to the idea of selling the discs, which I was really excited about. It costed more money, a lot more money, but we settled on a fair price, and not long after, I got them. So there you have it. So many people have been wondering where I could have possibly found these beta builds of Dead Rising, and that's it, there's the story. I also want to thank everyone out there who watches my videos, because if I didn't have such a following on this website, these builds might not have been in our possession right now. It's because of all of you that we now have these huge pieces of Dead Rising history, and trust me, one day we're gonna get TGS. One day. But until then, thanks for watching, and as always, subscribe for more.